Distribution of power. Federal powers. Number 1, who controls them? Number 2, what they control. Number 3, how are they regulated? We start with the federal powers under who controls. The Canadian political system and the Tier 1 legal authorities. We begin with the arrow up on the first legal authority of a political party on the federal level, CEO and auditor. These are the only 2 legal positions of the federal party. Regardless of what you've heard or what you've known, none of it's real. The only 2 real legal binding members are CEO and auditor. They create the party leader, or the party leader starts the party and assigns himself. That federal leader is the only person in Canada who's capable of becoming the federal prime minister, the ultimate power in Canada. Underneath the federal prime minister, we see his power over House and Senate. This is the Tier 1 legal authority. Federal powers. Number 2. What do they control? Well, first, party CEO and the auditor alone decide who can be leader, who will be in an EDA, 2 legal positions in absence of a leader, and they are subject only to a leader. Number 2. Party leader can remove anyone from any position by law. Remove any EDA, bylaw, constitution, or policy. They are the only one to sign off and sign on CAs at will. Number 3. Only a party leader can become prime minister by law. Number 4. Prime minister is both head of House and head of Senate. The PM whips MPs in House and appoints Senate according to friendship, wealth, or fame. Federal powers. Number 3. How they are regulated. Number 1. CEO and auditor are regulated by the Elections Canada, who runs with 2 acts by both House and Senate, which are controlled by the Prime Minister of Canada. Number 2. Leader is subject to Elections Canada, and 2 acts the leader has full authority over, subject only to becoming Prime Minister, or a Prime Minister changes the acts voted by the PMs, House and Senate. Number 3. Prime Minister is subject to the binding world laws of the UNSC, the Canadian Constitution, and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Prime Minister can only be held to World Court, Supreme Court of Canada ruling, official opposition control over House and Senate, limited constitutional powers of provincial legislatures who win the World Courts or Supreme Canada Court ruling, and by vote once every 4 years by the electorate. Number 4. House is regulated by the Prime Minister, Senate, and the electorate inside the electoral district boundaries. List of electorates once every 4 years. The House members are also subject to the Supreme Court of Canada's ruling. Senate is regulated by the Prime Minister and the Supreme Court of Canada. Provincial powers. 1. Who controls them? 2. What do they control? 3. How they are regulated. Now, on to provincial powers. Number 1. Who controls it? Let's look at the provincial political system at the bottom. You'll see 2 arrows, Tier 1 legal authority, and to the right, Tier 1 legal authority. As you go up, you see there's CFO, President, or Executive Director, and I say or. Arrows of power go straight up to provincial party leader. From there, provincial party leader is the only one to become the premier. His power goes down to the provincial assembly, and it also goes up against the federal prime minister, who, as you can see, the federal prime minister has more power over a premier. And that is decided by the Supreme Court of Canada, the ultimate law. And then again, you see House and Senate. And as you see, Senate comes down into House, and House goes back and forth between provincial legislature. Provincial powers. Number 2, what do they do? 1. Party CFO and president or executive director alone decide who can be leader, who will be in a CA, 2 legal positions, in absence of a leader, and are subject only to a leader. 2. Party leader can remove anyone from any position by law, remove any party CA, bylaw, constitution, or policy. They are also the only ones to sign off and on CIAs at will. They can cast MLA candidates in or out. 3. Only a party leader can become premier by law. 4. Premier is head of the legislature. The premier whips MLAs in legislature. A premier can cast an MLA in or out of the party caucus. Provincial powers. 3. How are they regulated? 1. CFO and president or executive director are regulated by the Elections Alberta, who runs with 2 acts by the legislature, which are controlled by the Premier of Alberta. 2. Leaders subject to Elections Alberta, and 2 acts the leader has full authority over, subject only to becoming the Premier, or a Premier changes the acts voted by the Premier's legislature. 3. Premier is subject to the Canadian Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Premier can only be held to World Court, Supreme Court of Canada ruling, official opposition control over legislature, limited constitutional powers of provincial legislatures who win world courts, Superior Court of Alberta, or the Supreme Court of Canada ruling, and by vote once every 4 years by the electorate. 4. Legislature is regulated by the Premier and the electorate inside the constituency boundaries. List of electorates once every 4 years. The legislated members are also subject to the Superior Court and also the ultimate Supreme Court of Canada's ruling. Distribution of power, federal and provincial. Not for public release. This concludes my presentation.